In the dark shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast. We are the brave and the bold.
When he declares that an axiom is a matter of arbitrary choice, and he doesn't choose to accept the axiom that he exists, he blanks out the fact that he has accepted it by uttering that sentence. The only way to reject it is to shut one's mouth, expound no theories, and die. An axiom is a statement that identifies the base of knowledge and of further statements pertaining to that knowledge, a statement necessarily contained in all others, whether any particular speaker chooses to identify it or not. Any axiom that is a proposition that defeats its opponents by the fact that they have to accept it and use it in the process of any attempt to deny it. Let the caveman who does not choose to accept the axiom of identity try to present his theory without using the concept of identity or any concept derived from it. Let the anthropoid who does not choose to accept the existence of nouns try to devise a language without nouns, adjectives, or verbs. Let the witch doctor who does not choose to accept the validity of sensory perception try to prove it without using the data he obtained by sensory perception. And let the headhunter who does not choose to accept the validity of logic try to prove it without using logic. Let the pygmy who proclaims that a skyscraper needs no foundation after it reaches the 50th story yank the base under his building and not yours. Let the cannibal who snarls the freedom of man's minds was needed to create an industrial civilization but not needed to maintain it be given an arrowhead and a bear skin and not a university chair of economics. Do you think they're taking you back to the Dark Ages? They are taking you back to darker ages than any your history has known. Their goal is not an area of pre-science, but the era of pre-language. Their purpose is to deprive you of the concept of which man's mind, his life, and his culture depend. The concept of an objective reality. Identify the development of human consciousness and you will know the purpose of their creed.
The Abracast. Occult, history, conspiracy, and violence.
Hey everybody, welcome. I know you're like, Jesus Christ, not again. But here we go for the Objectivism of John Galt, part 4. 4 days in a row. I just want anyone to realize how much work this is. I am John Towers, and this is the Abracast. I'm raring to go. We do have a lot of material still to get through, but I'm supposed to remind you of a few things. Cyrus has told me that I'm supposed to remind you that I'm not narrating an audiobook, okay? So with me stammering, interjecting, maybe editorializing and so forth might trigger you in some way, go to Audible and just get the fucking audiobook, okay? That's not what I'm doing here. I'm reading this infamous, very long speech from John Galt on the podcast. I'm not narrating an audiobook. So there's that. I stammer, I mispronounce things occasionally, and I editorialize often. So that's it. So if you want to just listen to the book, go fucking somewhere else and listen to it. Also, Ayn Rand, Atlas Shrugged, and the Philosophy of Objectivism are all, for some reason, controversial subjects. Ayn Rand is a controversial author. Atlas Shrugged is a controversial book. And Objectivism is a controversial philosophy. So, just because we're doing this today I guess it's going to be the fourth day of the Democratic National Convention, I'm not necessarily saying that objectivism is a universal truth. Just as when I covered the works of Plato, I didn't say that the works of Plato was a universal truth. When we covered Stoicism, I didn't say this Stoicism was a universal truth. I didn't say that the words of Zarathustra were a universal truth. We just went through them and we dealt with them as they were. I didn't talk about the universal truth of the allegory of the cave. I didn't talk about the universal truth of Epictetus. So I'm not here saying that Ayn Rand or Atlas Shrugged or John Galt has the universal truth. I just thought that this was the best way for me to rail against what everyone is going to be talking about at this Zoom convention, which now we're actually one day into as a time of this recording, and it's turned into a bit of a joke. But I'm all in. I do the full committal thing with everything that I do. So we're going to see this thing out through the end. I mean, before I started recording, so I'm recording on day 2 of the Democrat. I'm recording this right now on day 2 of the convention. The quote convention, the Zoomvention. I don't know, whatever they're going to wind up calling it. But I already saw a video clip from Elizabeth Warren, in 35 seconds into her address, her video package to the convention, she starts talking about how Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are going to be great for quote Indian country, unquote. So I can't wait to see what the rest of her presentation holds. If that was 35 seconds in, I can't wait. However, I do have to get over this because I do have still a lot of fucking things. I'm actually starting to look at my schedule and I'm like, oh, this is going to push into my weekend if I don't get my shit together. So, yeah, I'm John. This is the Advertise. Here we go. A savage is a being who has not grasped that A is A, and that reality is real. He has arrested his mind to the level of a baby at that stage when consciousness acquires its initial sensory perception. And has not learned to distinguish solid objects. It is to a baby that the world appears as a blur of motion without things that move. And the birth of his mind is the day when he grasps that the streak that keeps flickering past him is his mother. And the whirl behind her is a curtain, and the two solid entities that neither can turn into the other. They are what they are, and they exist. The day when he grasps the matter, has no volition, is the day when he grasps that he has. And this is his birth as a human being. That day when he grasps that the reflection he sees in the mirror is not a delusion, that it is real, but it is not himself. It is a mirage that he sees in the desert, is not a delusion, that the air and the light rays that cause it are real. But it is not a city. It is a city's reflection. When the day when he grasps that he is not a passive recipient of the sensations of any moment, that his senses do not provide him with automatic knowledge in a separate snatches independence of context, but only when the material of knowledge, when his mind must learn to integrate, in the day when he grasps that his senses cannot deceive him, on that physical objects cannot act without causes, that his organs of perception are physical and have no volition, no power to event or to distort, that his evidence they give him is an absolute. Oh my gosh. But his mind must learn to understand it. His mind must discover the nature, the causes of full context of the sensory material. His mind must identify the things that he perceives. That is the day of his birth as a thinker and a scientist. We are the men who reach that day, and you are the men who choose to reach it partly. A savage man who never does. To a savage, the world is a place of unintelligible miracles, where anything is possible to an inanimate matter, and nothing is possible to him. The world is not the unknown, but the irrational horror, the unknowable. He believes physical objects are endowed with a mysterious volition, motivated by causelessness, unpredictable whims, while he is a helpless pawn at the mercy of forces beyond his control. He believes that nature is ruled by demons who possess an omnipotent power, that the reality is their fluid plaything, where they can turn his bowl of meal into a snake and his wife into a beetle at any moment, where A, he has never discovered, can be non-A, they choose. They're talking about the media, right? I mean, they choose where the only knowledge he possesses is that he must not attempt to know. He can count on nothing. He can only wish. And he spends his life wishing, on begging his demons to grant his wishes by the arbitrary power of their will, giving them credit when they do, taking the blame when they don't, offering them sacrifices in token of his gratitude and sacrifices in token of his guilt, crawling on his belly in fear and worship of sun and moon and wind and rain and any thug who announces himself as their spokesman. Nowadays we would say spokesperson. Provided his words were unintelligible and his mask sufficiently frightening. He wishes, begs, and crawls and dies, leaving you as a record of his view of existence, a distorted monstrosities of his idol, part man, part animal, part spider, the embodiments of the world of non-A. His is the intellectual state of your modern teachers, and his is the world of which they want to bring you. If you wonder by what means they propose to do it, walk into any college, listen to this. Walk into any college classroom and you can hear your professors teaching your children that man can be certain of nothing, that his consciousness has no validity whatsoever, and that he can learn no facts of law of existence, that he is incapable of knowing an objective reality, what then is his standard of knowledge and truth? Whatever others believe is the answer. There is no knowledge they teach. There is only faith. Your belief is that you exist in an act of faith. No more valid than another faith is the right to kill you. The axioms of science are an act of faith. No more valid than a mystic's faith in revelations. The belief that electric light can be produced by a generator is an act of faith. No more valid is the belief that it can be produced by a rabbit's foot kissed under a step ladder and in the first of the moon. What truth is whatever people want it to be. And people are everyone except yourself. Reality is whatever people choose to say it is. There is no objective fact. There are only people's arbitrary wishes. A man who seeks knowledge is a laboratory by means of test tubes and logic is an old-fashioned, superstitious fool. The true scientist is a man who goes around taking public polls, and if it weren't for the selfish greed of the manufacturers of steel girders who have vested interests in obstructing the progress of science, you would learn that New York City does not exist because a poll of the entire population of the world would tell you by a landslide majority that their beliefs forbid its existence. I mean, this is some, it's like she's talking about today. I mean, I was just reading this thing about what's happening in New York. Is like the commercial real estate is just disappearing. New York is never going to be New York again. New York, this is New York City. New York City. It's WNBC. Not anymore, buddy. For centuries, the mystics of spirit have proclaimed that faith is superior to reason, but have not dared deny the existence of reason. Their heirs and product of mystics of muscle have completed their job and achieved their dream, and they proclaim that everything is faithful and call it a revolt against believing. As revolt against unproved assertions, they proclaim that nothing can be proved. As a revolt against supernatural knowledge, they proclaim that no knowledge is possible. As result against the enemies of science, they proclaim that science is superstition. As a revolt against the enslavement of the mind, and they proclaim that there is no mind. If you surrender your power to perceive, if you accept the switch of your standard from the objective to the collective, and wait for mankind to tell you what to think, you will find another switch taking place before the eyes you have renounced. You will find that your teachers become rulers of the collective, and if you then refuse to obey them, protesting that you are not the whole of mankind, they will answer, by what means did you know that we are not? We, brother, where did you get that old-fashioned term? This is so great. This is talking about the critique of Socrates' communism. We just did this last week, 2 weeks ago. If you doubt that such is in their purpose. Observe what their passionate consistency the mystics of muscle are striving to make. You forget that a concept such as a mind has ever existed. Observe the twists of undefined verbiage, the words with rubber meanings, the terms left floating in midstream, and the means of which they try to get around the recognition of the concept of, quote, thinking, unquote. Your consciousness, they tell you, consists of reflexes, reactions, and experiences. I knew I was missing my pages were stuck together. Urges and drives that refuse to identify the means by which they acquire the knowledge to identify the act they are performing when they tell it, or the act they are performing when you listen. Words have the power to condition you. They say and refuse to identify a reason why words have the power to change you. Blank out. A student reading a book understands it through a process of blank out. A scientist working on an invention engaged in the activity of blank out. A psychologist helping a neurotic to solve a problem and intangible, a conflict, does it by a means of blank out. An industrialist, blank out. There is no such person. A factory as a natural resource, like a tree and a rock or a mud puddle. The problem of production, they tell you, has been solved and deserves no study or concern. No, the only problem left for your reflexes to solve is the problem of distribution. Who solved the problem of production? Humanity, they answer. What was the solution? The goods are here. How did they get here? Somehow. What caused it? Nothing has caused it. Remember, you didn't build this. Hey, you didn't build this. Remember that? They proclaim that every man born is entitled to exist without labor. And the law... Oh my God. Universal basic income, here we go. And the laws of reality, to the contrary notwithstanding, is entitled to receive his minimum sustenance, his food, his clothing, his shelter, with no effort on his part, as his due and his birthright. To receive it from whom? Blank out. Every man, they announce, owns an equal share of the technological benefits created by the world. Created by whom? Blank out. Frantic cowards who posture as defenders of industrialists now define their purpose of economics as an adjustment between the unlimited desires of men and the goods supplied in their limited quantity. Supplied by whom? Blank out. Intellectual hoodlums who pose as professors shrug away the thinkers of the past by declaring that their social theories were based on an impractical assumption that man was a rational being. But since men are not rational, they declare there ought to be an establishment, some kind of system that will make it possible for them to exist while being irrational, which means while defying reality, one who will make it possible. Blank out. Any strange mediocrity rushes into print with plans to control the production of mankind. And whoever agrees or disagrees with the statistics, no one questions his right to enforce the plans by means of a gun. Enforce on whom? Blank out. Random females with causeless income flitter on trips around the globe and return to deliver the message that the backwards peoples of the world demand a higher standard of living. Demand of whom? Blank out. And to forestall any inquiry into the cause of the difference between a jungle village and New York City, they resort to the ultimate obscenity by explaining man's industrial progress, skyscrapers, cable bridges, power motors, railroad trains, by declaring that man is an animal who possesses an instinct of tool making. Do you ever wonder what is wrong with the world? Are you now seeing the climax of the creed of the uncaused and the unearned? Are all your gangs of mystics, of spirit and muscle, are fighting one another for power to rule? Snarling that love is the solution for all problems of your spirit, and that a whip is the solution for all the problems of your body. You have agreed to have no mind, granting man less dignity than they grant to cattle, ignoring what an animal trainer could tell him, that no animal can be trained by fear, that a tortured elephant will trample his torturer, but will not work for him to carry his burdens. They expect man to continue to produce electronics, tubes, supersonic airlines, atom-smashing engines, and interstellar telescopes, with his ration of meat for a reward and a lash on his back for incentive. Make no mistake about the character of mystics. To undercut your consciousness has always been their only purpose throughout the ages, and power. The power to rule you by force. The power has always been their only lust. From the rites of the jungle witch doctors, which distorted reality into grotesque absurdities, stunted the minds of their victims and kept them in terror of the supernatural for stagnant stretches of centuries, to the supernatural doctrines of the Middle Ages, which kept men huddling in mud floors of their hovels, in terror that the devil might steal the soup they had worked 18 hours to earn, to the seedy little smiling professors who assure you that your brain has no capacity to think, that you have no means of perception and must blindly obey their omnipotent will of that supernatural force. Society, all of it is the same performance for the same and only purpose, to reduce you to the kind of pulp that has surrendered the validity of its consciousness. But it cannot be done to you without your consent. If you permit it to be done, you deserve it. When you listen to a mystic's haranguing on about the impotence of the human mind and begin to doubt your consciousness, not his, when you permit your precariously semi-rational state to be shaken by any assertion and decide it is safer to trust his superior certainty and knowledge, the joke is on both of you. Your sanction is the only source of uncertainty that he has. The supernatural power that a mystic dreads, an unknowable spirit he worships, and the consciousness he considers omnipotent is yours. Wow. A mystic is a man who surrenders his mind at its first encounter with his minds of others, somewhere in the distant reaches of his childhood, when his own understanding of reality crashed with the assertions of others, where their arbitrary orders of contradictory demands, he gives in to so craven a fear of independence that he renounced his old rational faculty. At the crossroads of the choice between I know and they say, he chose the authority of others. He chose to submit rather than to understand, to believe rather than to think. Faith in the supernatural beings as faith in the superiority of others. His surrender took the form of the feeling that he must hide his lack of understanding, that others possess some mysterious knowledge of which he alone is deprived, that reality is whatever they want it to be through some means forever denied to him.
Learn more at abracast.com. Get bonus content by signing up for the mailing list. Get all that, plus many exclusive episodes by supporting the show at patreon.com or subscribestar.com.
From then on, afraid to think, he left at the mercy of the unidentified feelings. His feelings become his only guide, his only remnant of personal identity. He clings to them with ferocious progressiveness, and whatever thinking he does is devoted to the struggle of hiding from his self, that the nature of his feelings is terror. When a mystic declares that he feels the existence of a power superior to reason, he feels it all right. That power is not an omniscient super spirit of the universe. It is the consciousness of any passerby to whom he has surrendered his own will. A mystic is driven by the urge to impress, to cheat, to flatter, to deceive, to force that omnipotent consciousness of others. They are the only key to reality. He feels he cannot exist save by harassing their mysterious power and exhorting their unaccountable consent. They are his only means of perception, and like a blind man who depends on the sight of a dog, he feels he must leash them in order to live. To control the consciousness of others becomes the only passion. Power lust is a weed that grows only in the vacant lots of the abandoned mind. Every dictator is a mystic, and every mystic is a potential dictator. A mystic craves obedience from men, not their agreement. He wants them to surrender their consciousness to the assertions of his edicts. He wishes, he whims, as his consciousness is surrendered to theirs. He wants to deal with men by means of faith and force, and he finds no satisfaction of their consent if he must earn it by means of facts and reasons. So I gotta stop. I wasn't gonna do this, but I gotta stop here. Oh, come on, man. If you can't figure out who to vote for, Trump or me, then you ain't black. Boom. Reason is the enemy he dreads and simultaneously considers precarious. Reason to him is a means of deception. He feels that men possess some power more potent than reason. In others, their causeless belief, their forced obedience can give him a sense of security, a proof that he has gained control over the mystic endowment he lacked. His lust is to command, not to convince. Conviction requires an act of independence and rests on the absolute of an objective reality. What he seeks is power over reality and over men's means of perceiving it. Their mind and their power to interpose his will between existence and consciousness, as if by agreeing to fake the reality he orders them to fake men would in fact create it. Just as the mystic is a parasite in matter, he who expropriates the wealth created by others, just as he is a parasite in spirit who plunders the ideas created by others, so he falls below the level of a lunatic. He creates his own distortion of reality to the level of a parasite of lunacy, who seeks the distortion created by others. There is only one state that fulfills the mystic's longing for infinity, non-causality, non-identity. It is death. No matter what unintelligible causes he ascribes to his incommunicable feelings, whoever rejects reality rejects existence. And the feelings that move him from then on are hatred for all the values of a man's life, and of suffering, of poverty, subversiveness, and terror. They give him a feeling of triumph, a proof of the defeat of rational reality, but no other reality exists. No matter whose welfare he professes to serve, it will be the welfare of God or that disembodied gargoyle he describes as the people. No matter what ideal he proclaims in terms of the supernatural dimension. In fact, in reality, on earth, his ideal is death. His craving is to kill. His only satisfaction is to torture. Destruction is the only end the mystic's creed has ever achieved, as it is the only end that you will see them achieving today. And if the ravages wrought by their acts have not made them question their doctrines, if they profess to be moved by love, yet are deterred by piles of human corpses, Jesus, goddamn, it is because the truth about their souls is worse than the obscene excuse you've been allowed them. The excuse that the end justifies the means, and that the horrors they practice are means of a nobler end. Holy crap. The truth that those horrors are their ends. You who are depraved enough to believe that you could adjust yourselves to a mystic's dictatorship and could please him by obeying his orders. There is no way to please him. When you obey, they will reverse his orders. He seeks obedience for the sake of obedience, and destruction for the sake of destruction. You who are craven enough to believe that you can make terms with the mystic by giving in to his exhortations, there is no way to buy him off. The bribe he wants is your life, as slowly or as fast as you are willing to give it. And the monster he seeks to bribe is hidden, blank out, in his mind, which drives him to kill in order not to learn that the death he desires is his own. You are innocent enough to believe that the forces let loose in your world today are moved by greed for material plunder. The mystic scramble for spoils is only a screen to conceal their mind, the nature of their motive. Wealth is a means of human life, and they clamor for wealth. In imitation of living beings. To pretend to themselves that they desire to live, but their swinish indulgence in plundered luxury is not enjoyment, it is escape. They do not want to own your fortune. They want you to lose it. They do not want to succeed. They want you to fail. They do not want to live. They want you to die. They desire nothing. They hate existence, and they keep running, each trying not to learn that the object of his hatred is himself. You who've never grasped the nature of evil, you who describe them as misguided, idealist, may the God you invented forgive you. They are the essence of evil. They choose anti-living objects who seek, by devouring the world, to fill their selfless zero of their soul. And it is not your wealth thereafter. Theirs is a conspiracy against the mind, which means against life and man. It is a conspiracy without leader or direction. And the random little thugs of the moment who cash in on the agony, one land or another, and another are chance scum riding the torrent from the broken dam of the sewer of centuries, from the reservoir of hatred, for reason, for logic, for ability, for achievement, for joy, stored in every whining anti-human who ever preached the superiority of the heart over the mind. It is a conspiracy of all those who seek not to live, but to get away with living. Those who seek to cut just one small corner of reality and are drawn by the feeling to all the others who are busy cutting other corners. Conspiracy that unites the links of evasion. All those who pursue a zero as a value. The professor, who, unable to think, takes pleasure in crippling the minds of his students. The businessman, who, to protect his stagnation, takes pleasure in chaining the ability of his competitors. To the neurotic, who, to defend his self-loathing, takes pleasure in breaking men of self-esteem. To the incompetent, who takes pleasure in defeating achievement, the mediocrity, who take pleasure in demolishing greatness, the eunuch, who takes pleasure in the castration of all pleasures, and the intellectual munition makers. All those who preach that the immolation of virtue will transform vices into virtue. Death is the premise at the root of their theories. Death is the goal of their actions and practice, and you are the last of their victims. We who were the living buffers between you and the nature and your creed are no longer there to save you from the effects of your chosen beliefs. We are no longer willing to pay with our lives the debts you've accrued in yours, or the moral deficit piled up by the generations behind you. You had been living on borrowed time, and I am the man who has called in the loan. I am the man whose existence your blank outs are intended to permit you to ignore. I am the man who did not want either to live or to die. You did not want me to live because you were afraid of knowing that I carried the responsibility you dropped and that your lives depend upon me. You did not want me to die because you knew it 12 years ago when I worked in your world. I was an inventor. I was one of a profession that came last in human history and will be the first to vanish. On the way back to the subhuman, an inventor is a man who asks why of the universe and lets nothing stand between the answer and his mind. Like the man who discovered the use of steam, or the man who discovered the use of oil, I discovered a source of energy which was available since the birth of the globe, but which men had not known how to use except as an object of worship, of terror, and of legends about a thundering god. I completed the experimental model of a motor that would have made a fortune for me and for those who had hired me. A motor that would have raised the efficiency of every human installation. Using power, you would have added to the gift of a higher productivity to every hour you spend at earning your living. Then, one night at a factory meeting, I heard myself sentenced to death by reason of my achievement. I heard 3 parasites assert that my brain and my life were their property, that my right to exist was conditional and depended on the satisfaction of their desires. The purpose of my ability, they said, was to serve the needs of those who were less able. I had no right to live, they said, by reason of my competence for living. Their right to live was unconditional by reason of their incompetence. Then I saw that I was wrong. Then I saw what was wrong with the world. I saw what destroyed men and nations, and where the battle for life had to be fought. I saw that the enemy was an inverted morality, and that my sanction was its only power. I saw that the evil was impotent. That evil was the irrational, the blind, the anti-real, and that the only weapon of its triumph was the willingness of good to serve it. Just as the parasites around me were proclaiming their helpless dependence on my mind and were expecting me to voluntarily accept the slavery they had no power to enforce. Just as they were counting on my self-immolation to provide them with the means of their plan, so throughout the world and throughout men's history, in every version and form, from the extortions of loafing relatives to the atrocities of collectivized countries. It is the good, the able, the men of reason who act of their own destroyers, who transfuse the evil of the blood of their virtue and let evil transmit to them the poison of destruction, thus gaining for evil the power of survival, and for their own values the impotence of death. And I saw that there comes a point in the defeat of any man of virtue when his own consent is needed for evil to win. There is no manner of injury done to him by others can succeed if he chooses to withhold his consent. And I saw I could put an end to your outrages by pronouncing a single word in my mind. And I pronounced it. And the word was no. I quit that factory. I quit your world, and I made it my job to warn your victims and to give them the method and the weapons to fight you. And the method was to refuse, to deflect retribution. The weapon was justice. If you want to know what you lost when I quit, when my strikers deserted your world, stand on an empty stretch of soil in the wilderness, unexplored by men, and ask yourselves what manner of survival would you achieve, and how long would you last if you refused to think? With no one around to teach you the motions or if you choose to think, how much your mind would be able to discover. Ask yourself how many independent conclusions you have reached in your course of life, and how much of your time was reached in the course of your life, and how much of your time, doubled up, and how much of your time was spent on performing the actions you learned from others. Ask yourself who would be able to discover how to till the soil and grow your food, whether you would be able to invent a wheel or a lever, an induction coil, a generator, an electronic tube. Then decide whether men of ability are exploiters who live by the fruit of your labor and rob you of your wealth and that you produce, and whether you dare to believe that you possess the power to enslave them. Let your women take a look at the jungle female who her shriveled face and her pendulous breasts as she sits grinding meal into a bowl hour after hour, century by century, and let them ask themselves whether their instinct of tool making will provide them with their electronic refrigerators, their washing machines, their vacuum cleaners, and if not, whether they care to destroy those who provided it all, but only by instinct.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Send an email or visit us on social media to let us know what you think about this topic. And please remember to leave a 5-star rate and review.
Hey, did you learn something? Did you laugh? Supporting me is a way for you to be a part of the Abercast and ensure its growth and sustainability. It also means I can create a normal schedule for shows and bonus shows, as well as the exclusive Fellowcraft episodes. By supporting the show, you are not only a listener, but you are a part of the show. You supporting the show gives me a way to offer fun rewards as a thank you for showing your appreciation and support for our projects. Do you have an idea for a reward that you don't see? Let me know. My supporters are my partners. I currently pay for you to listen to the Abercast. Not only do I pay the hosting bills out of my own pocket, I volunteer my time and talent to each and every episode of the Abercast. The price of books, the time and resources of reading and researching, the massive amounts of gin and tonic needed, the equipment it takes to record the shows, the time and resources it takes to create the bonus material, and the cost to maintain the internet presence. Is it worth your support? I don't know. I'm proud of the Abercast, and I feel like I'm improving all the time. In addition to creating the show that you dig and that you are excited about, I also have a full-time commitment and other obligations. So why financial support? All of the supporters help me focus my time on the quality and development of the podcast. And what if you can't afford, $1 or $3 or $10 or whatever a month? Believe me, I get that. There are many degrees of support, but if you can't support the show financially, please consider leaving a 5-star rate and review on your preferred podcast app. And don't forget that you could sign into the mailing list and still unlock a lot of bonus content. Thank you. I cannot put into words how much it means to me that you listen to the show each time I post a new episode. Your feedback, support, and love of the stories that we talk about here is what keeps me going.